Hey everybody, and welcome back to the show. Hope you guys are having a good time out there. I see my hair's a little bit disheveled today, but it's just the way it goes. It's very disheveled today. Welcome back to the Kryptonite Show. Hope you guys are enjoying yourself out there. And of course, your host, Kryptonite Superman here. I see I've got Kryptonite in my title as well. We're having a lot of fun here on this channel for sure. Now let's get straight into it. If you haven't subscribed, like, share. We're obviously getting into some deep politics today. President Trump tariffs start Tuesday on China and, of course, Canada and Mexico. And, of course, we're going to get into a lot of the different topics related to that: drugs, free trade, manufacturing, and stuff like that, which is going to be pretty important there. Yeah, got really disheveled hair today. It's like a bit like Batman. All right, so let's get into it without further ado. And we're going to kick it off with some of the things that Trump's talked about. Trump, of course, is entering in the golden age for the United States, which is huge. And a big part of that, of course, is creating wealth. And he's using tariffs, of course, his favorite tool to change the world order in terms of trade, change it in terms of politics, and change it in terms of the US economy, and particularly around manufacturing. Now, you can typically do that if you have if you're holding all the cards, and you hear Trump talking about holding the cards. That's how he sees it. How many cards you got in a good poker hand? And of course, here's the US economy. US economy, of course, 20% of GDP. 2/3 of the US economy is consumption. And so this is a big deal, right? So he's got a lot of tools to be able to use, including military power as well. Everyone wants access to their market. It is a big deal there, right? So I think China's trade with the US is about 30%. And of course, Canada and Mexico, it's a huge percentage of theirs, right? You know, it's massive. So it is a big deal, 60 to 80%. It's a big number. I think for Canada, it's pretty large of a trade. Now, let's get into some of the stuff there. We've got a few comments in the chat, though. Let's get to that. We've got Steve Wright in the house. Hello, Superman. Steve Wright, Santa Barbara in here. Good to see you, Steve, as well. And we got also Matt in the house as well. What are you saying there, Matt? Howdy, Superman and all. How could you not like Trump as president? Maybe he's not perfect, but he's done more than anyone. I'm going to do a whole show on that probably later today, actually, because it's a great point, one worthy of a whole show. So we're going to get into that. All right, so let's get into the first little clip here from Trump about making America wealthy and the golden age. And, of course, he's doing so many things. The rest of the countries in the world have no idea what's coming over the next 4 years. He's only just begun, 5 weeks, that's it. And, of course, these tariffs coming up on Tuesday, the 4th of March. Let's check it out on what Trump says about creating wealth in America.
Word tariff is my favorite word in the dictionary. You know, we were the richest relatively think of this, from 1870 to 1913. That was our richest because we collected tariffs from foreign countries that came in and took our jobs and took our money, took our everything. But they charged tariffs, and we had so much money, they set up the 1887. Think of that, a long time ago, 1887 Tariff Commission. It was a commission of very important people to determine where we should spend all of the tremendous, vast wealth that we had. We had so much wealth. Wouldn't it be nice today? Of course, now we give it away to transgender this, transgender that. Everybody gets a transgender operation. It's just wonderful. No, we give it away like to crazy things. But in those days, it was different. It was a different world. It was a different country. But we were very rich.
All right, so tariff is a favorite tool of Trump's, and I think it's a masterful use. Now, in classic economics, of course, tariffs are just adding to the price, gets passed on to the consumer. And so a lot of liberal economists always go, boo, don't do tariffs, and you see it nonstop. Now, as you know, liberal economists and liberal politicians and commentators have been wrong for decades. We have to put up with them all the time. They're complete, absolute lunatics, which is worthy of a whole nother show, as Matt was saying. But in Europe, we still have them. And they are just dreadful. They are dreadful. Not only have they moved from being liberal, but they've moved to becoming a globalist, progressive nut jobs, bloodthirsty authoritarians. I mean, they are crazy out there these days. Man, we are lucky to have Trump, President Trump. Trump wants prosperity, safety, and world peace. These guys are just on nonstop into playing games, corruption, and the rest of it. So I'm with Trump. I think that getting prosperous and safe and all that is a very good thing. Now, obviously, you have to rejig the liberal globalist world order with all those progressive leaders running out there. You've got to shake things up. So you're going to have short-term volatility and Trump is using a number of tools to do that. So many things are happening all at once that the world is trying to keep up with them. And we've seen some recent moves of them trying to get together, unify, funny enough, to try and do that. Now, let's kick it off into what actual tariffs are coming up this Tuesday US time. So let's quickly check that out.
Now, Mexico, Canada, and China await Trump's promised tariffs this upcoming Tuesday for their failure to end the flow of deadly fentanyl into America, which has claimed hundreds of thousands of American lives. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has even gone as far as raising the prospect of U.S. troops on the ground in Mexico to take on the deadly drug cartels. But first, President Trump will impose a 25% tariff on both Mexico and Canada and another 10% tariff on China, taking its planned tariff to China.
All right, so you can see there the all imports for Mexico, 25%, even though they've had some pretty good negotiations. Mexico's put something like 10,000 troops on the border, maybe even up to 20 is in play. And of course, you got Pete Hegseth there, the Secretary of Defense, really putting pressure on Mexico, saying, we want you to do more. If you want help to get the cartels out, we're going to do that. They're being designated terrorist organization, so getting rid of them. Now, I tell you, if you don't get rid of the cartels now, you'll never do it. In fact, they won't. Not only will you never do it, but they'll get more powerful to the point where they will act like a second government inside the United States. That's how bad the cartels, how much power they had been achieving under President Biden, who was basically a crook president running his own little cartel. And of course, this is really huge. So Trump's going to have to clean up the cartels, clean up the crime. The human trafficking is unbelievable. And a lot of people don't want to hear about it because it's so horrible, but it is going on there. And of course, Trump is looking to clean up all that sort of stuff, including drugs. Drugs is another one there. So this is a multi-pronged tool to use tariffs to try and get changed behavior, particularly from corrupt and liberal societies, which are causing havoc around the world. So this is going to be pretty interesting to see that. Canada also, obviously, with the progressive leader Trudeau over there in the UK, trying to almost in tears about Ukraine, all the rest of it. It's just this sort of carry on is no good. And of course, there's at least 1% of the problems come through the northern border in Canada. And so that when Mexico gets shut down, the cartels just move up to Canada, and that 1% becomes 10, 20, 50% because they can't finding it much more difficult to get it through the Mexico southern border. Obviously, they try to do ocean, they try to do air, and other ways of trafficking, but it makes it very, very difficult, especially now that border has got down to over probably about 99% most days. Has been reduced because it's going pretty well there on the southern border. So Canada's a big issue. So pushing them to do a lot of stuff there. Obviously in Toronto and places in Vancouver particularly, you've got a lot of Chinese stuff coming through. Obviously Chinese is a lot of big producers in China, and they're coming through that system as well. So it's a lot of stuff to clean up. And of course, in China is the one that's making a lot of the stuff. 10% additional, in total 20%. So he's already done 10%, another 10%. This is already on, as I understand, the previous 25% he did back when he was President 45, back in 2016 to 2020. So putting that up. Now, that's to deal with a lot of the crime. And but on the other hand, it's also going to be dealing with allowing manufacturers to come into the US. So if the United States is going to have a big golden era, they need high tariff walls, even though the consumer to some degree gets charged those. It actually it gives an incentive for people to produce domestically, and so that's going to bring a certain amount of manufacturing back in the United States. In addition to that is the energy policy, which is designed to flood energy into the US and exports as well. That's why he brought in Japan and India, because they're the net buyers in the world. That was a master play. And how quick did they come in? Within like 2 weeks of his launch. So this guy is playing the big chess game, and he is going to outsmart everybody. He's got the all holding the majority of the cards, but he's also moving 50 times faster than these liberal countries leaders that are out there on multiple fronts. So they're going to try and push back on a lot of different things in trade and political positions. But look, if they want access to the American market, they're going to have to heed, right? He's also actually they always talk about free trade, but they've got all these barriers in the European Union and other countries, in Canada. They don't import cars and things like that. Well, Trump is actually going to make the world not only better for America, but actually better for free trade, because he's going to be looking to lower tariffs with reciprocal tariffs. So he's actually on the right side of all these issues. And so that's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. Now, he also got many other things going on all at once. And with his Dream Team cabinet now in place, you're going to see some incredible stuff in the first 6 months, let alone 4 years. So let's watch the rest of this tax details here.
After an initially announced 10% last month, all beginning this upcoming Tuesday. President Trump is also planning to implement reciprocal tariffs on April 2nd on all other countries deemed by the administration to have been treating the United States unfairly.
So that reciprocal tariff coming in a month later, almost on the 2nd of April, is going to be really important too, particularly around the Europeans. And we're going to talk about that at the end of this live stream.
Among the countries the White House is targeting, India, Japan, and the European Union, with the EU facing a U.S. response.
So reciprocal tariffs helps to lower the barriers to entry into India with that huge population, the world's biggest population, somewhere between 1.4, 1.5 billion people. So it's going to be really important there. And Japan as well, with a lot of protected industries. So that's going to be also give access to some, the third richest country on the planet. So very, very nice moves there.
Beyond just unfair trade, but to reciprocate against Europe's VAT tax and its fees and lawsuits against American companies.
Yeah, so Europe was only going to ratchet these up. The EU is like the template for the globalists. So to bash that down is really important. We've seen the Trump administration do that, not only on tariffs, but also on free speech and other really important issues that have typically made the West amazing, right? So Europe, of course, moving towards authoritarianism, globalism, and with the old Marxist ideologies kicking in there as well. And of course, they got their ultimate enemy, right? Putin, who they like to have forever, their forever enemy, I would say. All right, so let's kick on from this.
Joining me now in this Sunday Morning Futures exclusive is the nation's Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick. Secretary, great to have you this morning. Thanks so much for being here.
Great to be here, Maria.
Now
Mexico.
You gotta love Howard. He is, if you've seen him in the cabinet, he is just he laughs all the time. He just has a good time. He has a very good relationship with Trump and understands how Trump operates. So this guy is really, really impressive. And of course, he also is the Secretary Treasurer there of Treasury. So pretty important job. Oh, sorry, Secretary of Commerce, I should say. Very important job. All right, let's kick into a couple more comments in the chat before we get to the next section. We've got a few other people in the house. We've got Brian, a community leader in the house. Good to see you, Brian. What's up, folks? Loving that shield there, Brian. Looking good. We got Francia in the house as well. Hello, Francia. Hope you're doing well out there too, and enjoying some of this political commentary that we're doing these days. And then we've got Hedgehog in there as well. Always excited, which is great to see. Love that. So get in the chat there, folks. Put your opinions in there. Obviously be respectful. People don't have to agree with each other, but get in there as well. All right, so let's kick into the next section. And of course, there are 3 countries being tariffed here: China, Canada, and Mexico. Now, we're going to see if there's any changes to Mexico and Canada, but definitely the China one's going through there. And of course, China has already talked about responding to that. So let's kick this one on as well.
And now we've got the tariffs beginning on Tuesday against Mexico, Canada, and China. China has already said it's going to retaliate. Are you expecting American goods prices to go higher in the short term, given the fact that this looks like a fight here as well?
Well, look, we care about 2 things, right? The March 4th is about the border, and both Mexico and Canada have done a reasonable job on the border. They're both working hard on the border. We've had the lowest crossings ever under Donald Trump because of his ability to negotiate with Canada and Mexico. But the fentanyl continues to come into this country and continues to murder our people. And the ingredients are made in China. They're sent to Mexico and Canada, and then they come and attack our country, and that's got to end. So the president's been crystal clear on those 2 points. They have done a lot, so he's sort of thinking about right now how exactly he wants to play it with Mexico and Canada, and that is a fluid situation. There are going to be tariffs on Tuesday on Mexico and Canada. Exactly what they are, we're going to leave that for the president and his team to negotiate, and obviously I'm talking to him all the time to discuss what that's going to be on.
So some really important stuff there. He's saying that this is Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, saying, they have made some progress there, some good progress, reasonable progress. There's a lot more to be done, though, on border control, obviously, particularly around drugs, which is still a big problem getting through. So they want them to do a lot more law enforcement and source, to stop drugs coming into the USA. Now, they say with fentanyl and stuff like that, they're killing over 100,000 Americans. So imagine that, going to war, that's 100,000 Americans getting killed, basically. So that's basically it. But some people are saying that the numbers are more like 200,000 to 300,000 Americans, which is just an insane number. And you can see them on videos, see people drugged up with needles and all sorts of stuff on the streets. And of course, the homelessness as well is a problem in the United States. It's an area that I want to talk about on this channel, because I'm hoping that Trump looks to do several policies around that, in addition to all the prosperity and safety stuff that he's doing as well. He has talked about the homeless before. So it's definitely a big issue there.
Got to stop making these ingredients. Remember, in 2019, the Chinese told President Trump at that time that they would put the death penalty on anybody who made fentanyl. And today, they're giving the maximum subsidy they possibly can to the people making those ingredients. So the Chinese need to stop this murder of Americans, and Donald Trump is the only president who protects the American people.
So Trump putting a lot of pressure on China now, obviously, with these tariffs. This is a win-win for them, though. Obviously dealing with the drug fentanyl issue, as well as substituting manufacturing in the United States. And we're going to see a lot of money end up going back into manufacturing in the US to expand that, including the high-tech sectors we've talked about before, like AI and stuff like that, artificial intelligence, which we're seeing trillion-dollar investments there. Now, this is going to be really interesting to see. We know China's going to respond in kind. And so this is going to be really interesting to see where this all leads to as well. So it's going to be fun. All right, let's get on to the next part here and talk about the discussion, pros and cons of things that are happening at the moment.
Well, it sounds like President Trump knows exactly his customer in China and is dealing with that. But in terms of Mexico and Canada, what I think I hear is there is some room here. Maybe 25% tariff doesn't go into effect on Tuesday. Maybe he's able to negotiate it down, given that they have shown some willingness to help on the border.
They've done a very reasonable job on the border. I mean, I spoke to Tom Homan yesterday, and he was very optimistic about the kind of work that Mexico and Canada are doing on the border, lowest crossings ever. So in that regard, they've done an excellent job, but they just haven't moved on the fentanyl deaths in America, and that's one of those key things, protecting the lives of Americans. So the president is thinking about it. I think there are going to be tariffs on Tuesday on Mexico and Canada. Exactly what they're going to be, I'm going to leave that for the president to decide. He's got great advisors. I'm obviously at the table with him, and so are others. He's going to think about it. He's going to put them into place on Tuesday. The Canadians and the Mexicans have been talking to him. I think China's set. They either end these subsidies, and they end making these ingredients from fentanyl, or he's going to put tariffs on there. And if they think they're going to retaliate, remember, they have so much more that they sell to us than we sell to them. It's not even close. This
is a really important issue here. Yeah, there's running in some trade imbalances with some of these countries, but also the fact that they need to, US is the big consumer, and they manufacture and they need to sell to the US. So it is a big deal. And US has got the big incomes too, right? So big consumer, big incomes, it's the one that they want to sell to. So, Trump's really holding the dominant cards there.
battle that we're ever going to lose. And the president knows it. He does have the cards, and he's going to protect Americans.
Secretary, what about others and these reciprocal tariffs? You've been tasked with this job to study what reciprocal tariffs look like. When you look at Europe, are we talking about a tariff much higher than 25% because you're including the VAT tax and also all these other things that you've talked about before? It's not just about trade when it comes to Europe, is it?
Well, there's two things going on. Number one, there's reciprocity. Right? They have a VAT tax, and they have a tariff on cars. So 10% on cars plus, and all sorts of other products. Plus, they have all these non-tariff barriers where we can't sell our hair dryers there, but they can sell their hair dryers here. This nonsense has got to end. So that's reciprocity. And then number two, the president has called out cars. He's called out semiconductors. He's called out pharmaceuticals. He's called out copper, steel, and aluminum. You know, he is focused on bringing manufacturing back to America, and he's going to make sure it.
So there's a couple of things there. One, of course, Europe they've got common markets. They've got these barriers into trade into that common market, which what gives it, structure. And of course, the US wants to bring those down and get moved actually to more fair trade, which is sort of undermines the EU and kind of set up the economic zones. So that's a little bit interesting there. As well.
Comes back. So we want cars made here. We're going to reinvigorate Michigan. We're going to reinvigorate Ohio. This president is totally focused on building America back, and we're going to use tariffs to create fairness so our farmers can finally imagine India has 1.4 billion people, and they won't let us sell our agricultural products there. This nonsense has got to end. Imagine Modi came to America, and in the kindness of his heart, he cut the Kentucky bourbon tariff from 150% all the way down to 100%. I mean, come on. We need fairness, and we need the strength of Donald Trump to make the world reasonable to America and stop picking us off. It's over. Donald Trump's going to end it and make the world trade fairly with America.
So there's a couple of things there, of course, opening up the big markets like India, where they're looking to put tariffs on to open up that huge population base to agricultural products and other products from the United States. Also, obviously, with other car manufacturers in Europe, Japan and places also opening up car sales there and getting manufacturing back in the US, getting that flourishing as well. Now, there are very different consumer needs in different countries. People in America like particular cars, Japan like different particular cars, etc. But I think this is going to be a real big boom for manufacturing. And of course, one of the longer term themes around China has been, of course, that the US actually buying the manufactured good from China has actually industrialized China, also militarized them too, if you think about it, under the authoritarian leadership there, the Communist Party. And of course, that's kind of the irony of it all, right? But now Trump is kind of turning things around. Now, we hear this from the liberal. You talk about liberal people, liberal economists and policymakers, commentators. They just have been wrong for decades. We've had to put up with them with their stupidity. They dominate the government and state departments and all sorts of stuff like that, the media, and we have to listen to them. They're wrong time after time after time, and the societies have been in decline in the West, right? All because of their stupidity. And of course, this is where Trump's turning that thing on its head, right? Because they always used to say, "Oh, it's inevitable. China is going to become the global power. It's going to dominate everything." Well, nothing is inevitable about that. So these liberals in the West were handing over even more power over to the Chinese, who want to be the world domination. And of course, we already see that into the South Pacific and then the Pacific. They're expanding all the time. Right. And so this is just crazy stuff. We know in the southern border, they were sending tons of Chinese citizens were going through a special route through South America there up through to Mexico into the US as well. Very well funded as well, I might add. And of course, we got a lot of these issues. So, but Trump, all you needed was a leader like Trump to come in and say, no, we've got such a big asset base. We're going to find out exactly how big that asset base is. And we're going to make America into the golden age. And of course, China will never be able to catch up then. Now, on the other hand, also China economy is actually struggling. Some people say that its GDP is probably only 0%, maybe 1% tops. Of course, the Chinese government's coming out with 5%. And of course, you guys know it used to be well over 10%. and of course that is slowing down. So they've got their own problems. They've also got a aging population and very few young people because of the one-child policy. They've got a lot of issues over there that are also going to play out over the decades ahead. So it is some pretty interesting stuff there. But of course, Trump there is going to make the golden age, and it's so impressive what's going to happen there from there. So that is pretty cool. So these tariffs going to get manufacturing back in the US. And of course, with the oil and gas boom that they're going to be looking to do, it's going to be pretty massive with lower costs. That's going to drop all the costs and therefore make everything a lot more competitive. They're going to bring AI and advance the productivity in the United States. A lot of good things coming over the next 4 years there. All right, so Trump's actually gone further than this, obviously dealing with some of these liberal politicians, what I really call progressive politicians these days. Which have, is far to the left. And of course, I see them as useful idiots for the globalists, right? The guys, the really big, powerful people in behind the scenes that are running the show. They got useful idiots with these, progressive Marxist kind of guys that are all authoritarian. Have you noticed they're all authoritarian? All of them are nasty narcissists. They're all narcissists. They're all a whole lot of them. Just terrible people. And I would say a good proportion of them are also pedophiles as well. And they're running our policies. They're running our social policies and setting policy for children. So if you wonder why it's so aggressive, it's all because of all this sort of stuff that's happening with these people that are leading the West. It's crazy. Now Trump's had them on. Obviously, Trudeau is one of the worst of them all. And of course, Trump had something to say about that, saying, hey, if you want to avoid tariffs, you want to be better off, then why don't you become the 51st state of Canada there? So we're going to check that out as well.
And I say
can't say that Trump hasn't got a good sense of humor. That's for sure.
Tariffs, no nothing. And I say that we give them military protection. They have a very small military. They spend very little money on military. On NATO, they're just about last in terms of payment because they say, why should we spend on military? That's a tremendous cost. Most nations can't afford to even think about it. Why should we spend on military? The United States protects us. And I would say that's largely true. We protect Canada, but it's not fair. It's not fair that they're not paying their way. And if they had to pay their way, they couldn't exist. When I spoke to, let's call it the Prime Minister rather than the governor, but when I spoke to him, I said, why are we giving you $200 billion a year? He was unable to answer the question. I said, why are we letting you make millions of cars and send them in? He was unable to answer the question. Justin Trudeau, a nice guy. I think he's a very good guy. I call him Governor Trudeau. He should be.
So he says this is how Trump works with the art of the deal. He says that Trudeau is a really good guy, but he knows Trudeau is a really bad guy. So this is how Trump works. So when we hear him say stuff like that, and you obviously know he's bad, then he's just doing the politics. He doesn't think he's a good guy. He knows he's a bad guy, but he's just doing the politics. And of course, he also put out his own jet. He'll do one side being a nice guy, and then he'll play bad cop on the other side. So you'll see him swing across these two, because that's part of the other deal where he creates this ambiguity there, and it's also part of the other deal. It's very good, actually, a tactic. People don't know, where's this guy? Where's he going? Where's he going? And before you know it, bam, you've been hit already by the thing. So it's pretty impressive there.
The fact is that if we don't give them cars, we don't have to give them cars. The tariffs will make it impossible for them to sell cars into the United States. The tariffs will make it impossible for them to sell lumber or anything else into the United States. And all I'm asking to do is break even or lose a little bit, but not lose $200 billion.
All right. So, when you're running deficits with countries, you basically have to fund that deficit, right? So if you have a trade deficit, you have to find money to fund that. Otherwise, it just accumulates, right? So that is really a big deal there. Now, that is some of the cool stuff happening there. Now, we do know that some of the states in Canada are actually pretty keen to join the United States. So that's going to be interesting to see where that actually goes to. We also saw that a question was asked when UK Prime Minister Starmer was with Trump at a press conference about Canada and saying, "Oh, it's under the King's domain as part of the Commonwealth. What do you feel about that?" And of course, Prime Minister Starmer called about, said, "Well, we know what you're trying to do. You're trying to create a divide between us and the United States." And of course, Starmer knows he needs the US. Some of the other European leaders are deluded. They think they can get away without the US, which just irrationality. at least Starmer, for all the bad things he is, and he's a terrible Marxist authoritarian, he knows that he needs Trump as well. So it's pretty important. The other thing, of course, they try to play, right? Trump knows they're playing him. When they try to play him, Trump knows he's not ignorant, and he's learned a lot over in his first term for sure. The other thing, of course, is that Trump shut that conversation down in that press conference because he has his own plans, I'm sure, and his bigger plan there. Now he's thinking. You got to remember, Trump's not just thinking about Ukraine and Russia. He's not just thinking about China and Mexico. He's thinking about the whole world. He's America first, but he's also thinking about the whole world. He wants world peace. He wants prosperity. He wants to make a better world. But he also is playing a number of things to get America in the best position, because the stronger America is, the better off the rest of the world is, as long as the America goes back to its first principles, and that is democracy, freedom, and all those good things. Because the globalists, liberals, and progressives in the West have been taking that away. UK, Germany, Canada, all big examples of that. They're taking our rights away one after another. And of course, that is just a horrific thing. The West is in massive decline because of those people. And Trump is our only hope to turn it all around. So looking forward to that. And of course, a lot of these guys are bloodthirsty with this death in the Ukraine war. And so we've got to get that turned around. It's funny because they're against the Gaza war after the Hamas terrorists, but they're pro 2,000 or 3,000 men dying every day. In fact, at the moment in the Ukraine, the Russians are making some big advances at the moment, which is costing a lot of lives just this week alone. So yeah, it's some crazy stuff. So Trump's trying to solve all that. So you got to think about that whenever you're listening to him say stuff. You got to think, where's he actually? What's his touch points for that? Now that is the 51st state of Canada, which I think is pretty good. And if you think about it, it's you've got the United States, you've got Canada, and then you've got Alaska and Greenland. Imagine that mighty continent all together. And we know that quite a few people in Greenland are also keen to come to the United States. So we'll see how that sort of narrative progresses, because that would make a very powerful continent, pretty much versus Russia and China. And he knows this, right? And of course, he knows also that he's trying to pivot a little bit from Europe with NATO, pivoting towards the Indo-Pacific with China, because China is the big game, big antagonist out there, despite all the good things it's trying to do around, building its economy. And at the moment, it's trying to clamor for resources. That's why going to the South Pacific, but it's also looking to militarily project itself as a superpower, particularly if it decides to take Taiwan. If it decides to take Taiwan and America responds, at the moment, Trump's, of course, kept that ambiguous. That allows them to play a lot of different cards. Then he can actually adjust that. Like if he decides, obviously, go defend, which I would say is the most likely outcome, that would cause China won't just go for Taiwan. They'll have to go for a lot of other countries. They'll actually have to go if they really want to win that. If they think they can't win it in a very short space of time, like 24, 48 hours, they actually have to do a regional war, which means they've got Japan, and they're going to have allies to do that. So it's going to be pretty interesting. If they make a mistake, if they lose, it's bad for China. It's bad for China. So we'll see how that goes. Now, some of you may or may not be aware, but China's actually got building its fourth aircraft carrier. That's actually going to be the one most compatible to the US. I understand it's going to be nuclear. As far as I understand, all three of their current aircraft carriers are diesel. I think all three of them are. And I think the third one that they're currently testing has got, I think, those electric takeoff setups. But apart from that, they are advancing. Once they get 4 aircraft carriers, 3 of them will be what I'd call coastal aircraft carriers. They can go outside of course, China with fuel supply ships, but that does make them a little bit more handicapped as opposed to the American ones, which can be on at sea all the time. And of course, we've got one of those, I think, in Japan at the moment, which can be done. So it's pretty crazy stuff there. That is a serious threat there at the moment. Of course, a lot of that issue is something that Trump's thinking about as well. Now, the more powerful the United States is, the better off they are at dealing with that. So that's going to move us towards Europe. So we're going to talk about that because Europe's going to be coming up with reciprocal tariffs in April. So that's something we're looking forward to there in April as well. But before we do that, let's get back to some comments in the chat. We had talked about Matt, didn't we? We got Mike Roth in the house there. Hi, yes, sir. are a great news podcast. I am a very critical ass too, says Mike. Hey, thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. A big shout out to you. A lot of love here from Francia for everybody in the chat there. Nice one. And we got Brian says, like it, chat it, and comment it up, folks. Yeah, definitely get in the chat there. Obviously, like the people's opinions. Always stay respectful, of course. We like that, you can disagree. Just be respectful in disagreements. We've got Matt in there as well. How's the sick education system going in New Zealand? Now, Superman, has Trump had an effect on the sick dictators that indoctrinate and teach children that it's okay to choose if you want to be a boy or girl? Hey, look, Matt, we had a government that was going to come in. We had a coalition government. I already knew that it's got three different parties: the National Party, the ACT Party, and the New Zealand First. Now, New Zealand First is the party that's quite similar to Trump. The other two have both got progressive. They're conservative on the economic side, but they're socially progressive on the social side. So, and of course, that's a contamination that's been happening over the last couple of decades of indoctrination. So, by the mainstream media and ideologists that have been coming out of the 70s, right? So we're still victims of that. The RSC is what you're talking about, where they're teaching all those children to be confused and all sorts of other terrible things that they teach them. That is still in our education system. The government said they were going to get it out, but they're still supported it because at the end of the day, they're a group of secular progressives that are pretty bad people. So we haven't got rid of those yet, unfortunately, Matt. Dictators, they are a form of dictator too. And that is in New Zealand, but it's in a lot of the West. And of course, a lot of we find out quite a bit of funding was coming in through from the US aid in the United States into New Zealand as well. Just one of the many recipients, particularly universities and NGOs and things like that were spewing out this ridiculous nonsense. Brian says there are only two genders and they God-given and can't be changed. Hey, look, it's biological. It's God-given. It's just what it is. But these people, progressives, live in the land of make-believe, as I always say. But they try to enforce it on the rest of us, right? That's the problem. I always say, here's a test for you. Just think about the last couple of decades, and since the turn of the millennium in 2000, and think about what your views were then, if you're old enough to remember, and what your views are now, and think, actually, how many things that I believe now mainstream media have told me about in the last couple of years, which are really sick things, but you believe them. That's a good test, good wake-up test there. Brian says, the real war is the cultural war going on in the world. Build culture through connections. Discord is a great place to build with the like-minded people. Just saying, absolutely, Brian, you're 100% right there. So if you haven't joined our Discord, folks, the link's in the video description. Join up today, only $5 a month for that. If you want to join our crypto strategy club, that's $35 a month, which is really excellent value. And of course, I've got a new product in there now, one-on-ones with myself, talking about crypto and personal finance there. So that is just launched yesterday, actually. And I've just posted it in the chat today, in the video description, so you can see that there. All right, so Matt also says, by the way, Superman, what's your opinion on Helen Clark and John Key, just in case my friend is watching? Hey, look, Helen Clark is one of the principal people that started the decline of New Zealand. She's a globalist, but she was third most powerful in the UN after she left her prime ministership here in New Zealand as the leader of the Labour Party here, which is obviously a left-wing socialist, Marxist, communist party, and she wreaked havoc. She closed down one of our major, if not more than one of the major mental health wards, and normalized mental health issues. That's what part of the problem with the left, right? Normalizing mental health issues. And of course, John Key there also aligned with them around the treaty issues and creating apartheid in New Zealand. So these people are really wicked people. Instead of treating everybody the same, they've created apartheid and put this Marxist progressive ideology imposed on Kiwis for the last couple of decades. So it's been pretty scary stuff, and she's still piping up these days, right? So pretty sad. All right, so kind of cool. Let's get into this. We've got Matt says, hey, Brian, big shout out there. We've got Lance Mitchell in the house there. Hey, what's up, Hex? Hey, good to see you, Lance. Great to see you in the chat there too. Hope you're doing well. Now let's kick it off into our final section of the show with the Europeans, right? So obviously in a month's time, there's obviously coming up with tariffs for Japan, India, and of course probably South Korea. But we also got obviously Europe, and Europe is a big problem, right? Europe is the biggest out of them all, I would say. Because Europe has got we've got these globalists and Marxists operating over there, and they are deteriorating Europe. Obviously, you've seen massive crime and violence, cultural takeover and invasion and replacement. I mean, everything you can think bad happening over there is happening, and it's run by a complete bunch of elite lunatics, and they don't disappoint. They do not disappoint. So let's check out this little video here about Europe as well.
All set? Okay, let's go.
So this video showcases Zelensky there after going from the White House and on his little tour on Fox News and other channels. He went over to Grandiose here with the Europeans. So they're all colluding, right? They're all colluding, all these Europeans. They're all nutters. They're all authoritarians. They're all just, they want everybody to be slaves and them to be the elites. And this is how they work. They're all narcissists. It's very hard to take any of these people seriously. They're all colluding together, and they're all warmongers. They love bloodshed. They also they really want the end of the war. They could have tried to get the end of the war for years. They've just been going on and on and on. And without America propping up Ukraine, despite the support from the European Union, it really wouldn't have happened, right? So you're talking about maybe 100 to 150 billion from the Europeans, another 350 billion from the US, and of course providing advanced weapons, intel, logistics, and things like that. The US is so pivotal there, and of course the US has about 100,000 troops in Europe also at different bases, and so that's also part of the thing, right? Will Trump actually, he wants them to increase their spending to help support themselves rather than the US paying it all. He likes people to pay their way, and of course the US got like 100,000 troops or so in Europe. So that's a massive deterrent. So every time Zelensky goes around saying, "Oh, America, you're going to be invaded. You're going to feel the pain." Remember in the White House, he said that you're going to feel the pain. Just what a manipulated narcissist this guy was, right? And a complete amateur diplomacy, and of course, probably utterly corrupt as well. And of course, he's sending a lot of his generation, his own people, to the front lines to be butchered in an unwinnable war. The war is unwinnable. There is no winning with that war there. Because if they did get to even to the border, you're looking at Russia probably using tactical special weapons or tactical nukes. So there is no winning. But the chances are they're not going to win anyway because the Russia already has a 3-to-1 advantage in the military on the ground. So it's really crazy. And we see even this week that the Ukrainians are losing ground quite significantly there as well, and a lot of men as well. So it's pretty crazy. So these guys here are all a joke. All these guys here, look, even Trudeau, you can see him in the second line there, back from over from Canada. These guys are complete nutbags. And you got Starmer, President UK Starmer there, who's oppressing his own people, destroying his own country, standing there acting like I'm the guy that's going to bring it together, a unified Europe, and it's all going to be good. But really, thousands of people are dying each week. I mean, these guys are just make you sick. Now, there's some people out there that love this stuff. They love the death. They think that they're going to win the war, and they're all deluded because that's not happening. So it's just hilarious, this stuff. And when I say hilarious, not actually hilarious. It's just, what do you call it, sadly hilarious or something like that. Pretty crazy. All right, so let's just watch these guys, these real buffoons get together in this little video.
Right, thank you. Very good, thank you.
So you got Trudeau at the bottom, back right there. Of course, he's dissolved the parliament, and he's basically running a dictatorship at the moment in Canada. We're waiting for elections to come through, and there's challenges in the courts there because there's no parliament being attended. Right? This is how these guys operate: narcissistic, authoritarian, globalist, socialist nightmares. I mean, they're just really horrible. And of course, they love indoctrinated kids. They love ruining people's lives, and they love people being propagandized so much that they enjoy their lives being ruined. It's the psychoticness of all these people, because a lot of people can't see this. They don't have the critical thinking, and they just go for it. Right? They just want to be a soccer mom, or they want to, just get on with life, which is fair enough. But at the end of the day, they're voting in these people. It's pretty crazy. And of course, we know how they like to target women and children these days. They're the easier target, right?
All set? Okay, let's go.
So you also got Zelensky there wearing his usual casual outfit. Everyone else is in suits, and this guy turns up like an absolute amateur. His politics is like an amateur. He goes into these meetings and he manipulates. Now, the thing with the Europeans, he doesn't have to do much because they're all wanting to do it too. They're going on about we're protecting Europe and all this sort of stuff. There's no way that Putin's going to be invading. Like I've already shown you before, he doesn't have the army for it. And of course, there's 100,000 US troops sitting in the countries as well. It's just crazy. All that sort of stuff's nonsense. And of course, the Europeans, even though their armies are smaller, they have very advanced conventional weapons. So it's all just deluding. And that's why Trump was so annoyed when he was sitting in the Oval Office and Putin and Zelensky's telling him, you're going to feel it. They're going to feel the influence. They're coming. And it's like, yeah, right. Come on. I mean, talking about the United States here and a big fat ocean between. I mean, this is how silly it is. Plus, they got 100,000 troops and all advanced weapons from the United States in NATO anyway. I mean, essentially, America is the bulk of NATO, and despite the stuff. Now, also the other thing is a lot of these countries are quite poor. Their economies are struggling. They're cutting back some other costs to try and do the military costs. So they're in a bad state because they're all ruining their countries, right? Cutting back with the net zero, so they're cutting back on cheap fuel for expensive fuel. The Germans had to shut down all the nuclear power plants and then had to buy gas off Russia. I mean, these guys are complete clowns. Now you got good old Canadian Trudeau over there talking about, oh, we're going to give you gas and stuff like export. Well, actually, most of the oil, for example, from Canada comes through. It's sour crude. It has to come through to the refineries in America because this clown couldn't even manage to make enough refineries in Canada. So it just goes on and on and on. These clowns, and of course LNG as well. So it really is crazy. These people are he was a school teacher. Nothing against school teachers, but he's just a crazy idiot there. And of course, he's not like an Einstein or anything. He's just just an average Joe that has a narcissistic authoritarian traits. Really crazy stuff. These people here. All right, so let's keep playing the rest of the stuff because it is tough to watch.
Please stop moving.
Thank you. Thank you.
So these guys are getting together. They all think they're very clever. They're going to have a unified front for Europe. They're going to do. They all got back at Trump saying, "Oh, Trump was bad in the Oval Office. How disrespectful." Where actually it was Zelensky that was disrespectful. Not only in the 40-minute Oval Office press conference, but in the lead up to that as well. We're finding out from cabinet members how bad he was and how he was just harping on about how he wanted all this stuff, and that's what he deserved in the negotiations with Russia, where he has no move at the moment. He's got no move. Only America's able to not even the Europeans can negotiate the peace. Only America can. Only Trump can, because he's the only one willing to and open to. These other guys are all just talking about getting militaristic, which we saw today with UK Starmer putting in all these conditions to try and give leverage in the discussion. And they have no leverage. Putin's not interested in the Europeans. He offered already a chance to end the war earlier, and they rejected it because they are so bitter. It's less about the fact that will Russia actually deliver on peace as opposed to the bitterness now that's and corruption, I would say as well. Not just bitterness, but corruption coming from Zelensky. We got a couple other comments in here. So we got Matt says, thanks, Superman. Likewise, opinions. Nice one. We got Brian says, nice suit, Zelensky. Not, says Brian. Not. Also, Matt says, looks very professional. Yeah. Well, someone asked him in the White House, remember, why doesn't he wear a suit? So Trump let him off. That, this little PC. Do you think he has the lifts in his shoes, boots? Just saying. Probably does his high heels from his. If you guys don't know, he was a performer and he used to do some terrible performance, very draggy, queeny type stuff. The old Zelensky there before the war. Probably got high heels on. Yeah. Now, some things you may know, like under Obama, they did a pretty much coordinated coup in the Ukraine back in it was about 2014, I think, somewhere in there when Russia came in. And that coup got rid of a prime minister that was neutral, and they put in their old crooks there. And that's where you start getting the quid pro quos from Biden and everything else. So there's a lot of corruption in the UK. And a lot of the media in the Europe used to write about, oh, they're corrupt, they're this, and that. And now the media's completely switched. Oh, no, let's fight for the end to the end and all that sort of stuff. It's just complete nonsense from mainstream media as well. Let's see what else other comments we got there. Brian says Zelensky dresses like Antifa. Surprised he doesn't have a mask on. Yeah. Well, they never get arrested, do they, these days? Maybe in America, maybe. Lance says only military dictators wear uniforms, not suits. That's right. And that's what he is. That's the amount of corruption. Where all the billions of dollars go. There's something like $100 billion or something missing. It's like a huge number. And of course, Ukraine's famous for corruption. And these guys like Zelensky are part of that whole thing. Now, there's a very difference. A lot of people are saying, well, then he's turned off democracy in the Ukraine, and it's just like Winston Churchill did in World War II. But the difference with Winston Churchill was that he formed a coalition, whereas he's not done it. He's got rid of all of the other political parties, put them in prison and abused them, sent them offshore, all sorts of stuff. That's not very Winston Churchill at all. And where's all the money go? I mean, it's just the list goes on. Right, biolabs in the UK, just non-stop issues there. And Nazis, you get it. It just keeps going on and on. All right, so let's get back to our final bit of the day here on the European expansion. So we're expecting this reciprocal tariffs coming in April the 2nd, after, of course, our tariffs come out on Tuesday for China, Canada, and Mexico. Now, they may be a bit different from what we posted earlier because Trump may decide to change those a little bit because of negotiations and progress being made. We shall see. So let's quickly, I'm just going to bring up this link here. So let me just close that down. Close that down as well. Oh, is that the right one? No, close that one. No, we've got that one. We're going to close that one. Yeah, that's the one. All right, so we've got this article here. European leaders are grappling with how to handle icier relations with the US. No kidding. Regain control of the White House this year. The Europeans have serious problem in readiness. I'm going to zoom in on that so make it a bit bigger. Europeans have a serious problem of readiness. They're trying to fix, but it takes time. Gamal Agrand, their former NATO official who is now with the European Council on Foreign Relations, said in a Washington Post report on Sunday, if Trump decides I'm going to pull out US troops from Germany just because I'm upset with the trade imbalance, that's much more complicated to manage than to say we have a plan to do this in extra years. Now, he hasn't said he's going to do that yet. He wants them to pay up. I don't quite see him getting out of NATO at quite this yet. I know I've seen pros and cons of people saying that. Not quite there yet on that one. The comments come as European leaders have become increasingly anxious about the future of the security of the continent in the second era of Trump. And of course, this is where Prime Minister of the UK, Starmer, has been trying to shore up the alliance, right? Trying to get a state visit with the king that he's done. Really charm him when he came to the White House, sign up new agreements, things like that to really shore up there, because he knows that if the Europeans try to go alone, they don't have the money and they don't coordinate very well. They're good at oppressing their own people. Very difficult to actually get their own army up and running in Europe, because really NATO doesn't really have an army. It's really the United States plus any of the countries that go called upon to meet their requirements. So it is to get a European army, that's going to be a bit much tougher. Actually, I would, if I was in Europe, I'd be even more horrified in some ways. What are they going to use the army for? Because they're so good at putting people in prison for memes and their political oppositions that what are they going to use that army for, right? So that's the other side of it. With the Washington Post reporters, the leads are wary that the American president is too friendly with Moscow. Now, this is the typical liberal stuff, right? So this is the liberal side. So how can you ever go to have peace if you're not going to be friendly with the people that you're going to go into? You got to have respect, and you got to go in there and make a deal. You can't just say, "Oh, you're a dictator now. Let's sit down and have a discussion." Dictators not going to sit there and go, "Thanks very much. I'm not going to accept that. You treat me with some respect. I'm a dictator after all." Right? That's how it works, not the other way around. And so these liberals completely push the story out. It's just absolute madness. Trump, of course, is trying to play and get people to the process to set up before they even have the meetings, right? So they're going to set up a political process where they have their ambassadors setting ambassadors up as well, and getting all that process set up before they even have negotiations, right? And that's what we saw in Saudi Arabia there. and that they widely expect them to pull back roughly 20,000 troops that were deployed by the continent by former President Joe Biden in the aftermath of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. I would not be surprised if at some point those troops go back to their home base in America, NATO diplomat told the outlet, while noting that these troops were sent to Europe at the height of the emergency, that the exit would be, so to speak, a return to normality. So there's still going to be a massive amount of troops, probably 80,000 troops in Europe that are there for the US, but pulling back these extra troops. So they're extra troops that they could pull back. And he could do that as a tactical snub there to the Europeans, that the Europeans try to be too cheeky like they were in that video, right? They think they're really clever in there. So the current number of US troops in Europe has fluctuated between 75,000 and 105,000 since 2022, according to data from the Center of Strategic International Studies, with the higher end of that number being a result of the surge of forces into the region ordered by Biden. It's at 20,000. But fears persist that those numbers could fall even more rapidly than expected under Trump, despite assurances that Trump administration officials that there are no imminent plans for a large reduction of forces on the continent. Now, that will depend on how the Europeans behave. And of course, Trump will not be happy if they try to manipulate him, as they've already started to try to do. Right? He doesn't fall for these things, but he does have end goals. He does want peace. And the other thing is, what negotiations does he have with Putin? Because he wants to solve the Ukrainian war, but he also wants to have a more prosperous, safer world. And therefore, you've got to bring Putin back into the global, commerce and politics, right? Because if you don't, you've just got this endless war and aggressor. And we do know there are good reasons why Putin wants to get back into the public fold, because, they are winning this war, in my view, this particularly unwarrantable war for Ukraine. But their economy is actually starting to struggle, right? You can run a war economy for a couple of years and then you start to struggle. And we're starting to see that in Russia there. And of course, the central bank in Russia is also warning about these things around inflation and interest rates. So definitely pain is starting to be felt. And of course, Putin will want to get back on that stage on his own terms. Though. So that's going to be part of the negotiation. But fears persist that those numbers could fall even rapidly. We'll see how that goes. Those fears have been buoyed in recent events, including Vice President J.D. Vance remarks at the Security Conference in Munich, in which the American leaders scolded European leaders for their alleged break from shared values such as freedom of speech, and Trump's widening rift with the Ukrainian Zelensky. Now, I don't see those 2 points at all impacting the troops. For me, it would be much more around how Europe leaders are treating Trump, and of course, are they paying their way, and what has actually happened with Putin versus the Zelensky war. Trump's going to think about that far more reasonable, and of course, they'll just keep pressuring. Having the troops there actually helps with being able to pressure the Europeans, not the other way around. They see this is the problem with these sort of views, is Trump always thinks, how many cards have I got playing this game, and the more cards I've got, the better a chance I've got of winning the outcome, right? So that's where Trump thinks there. However, American presidents from both parties have been warning European leaders for more than a decade of the potential shift of troops away from the continent, as the US seeks to focus more effort on confronting the emergent threat of China in the Indo-Pacific, leaving Europe in charge of a greater share of its own security. And that's got to happen over time. And this will probably be a big step towards that actually happening. Indeed, the US military footprint in Europe has already fallen drastically since the Cold War. The height of the hostilities between the US and Soviet Union in the 1950s, 1960s, and the US had 500,000 troops deployed in the continent. There were still roughly 350,000 troops in Europe at the start of the 1990s. And you got to remember, this is when NATO was expanding over through to Russia through the former USSR countries from 1992. And this is a big part of one of the reasons why Putin invaded Ukraine, in addition to the coup in 2014, which took out the neutral guy, put in a pro-NATO European EU guy, and of course all the corruption that we've had since then. So there are reasonable reasons why Putin has done that. Now, that being said, of course, none of us think that killing's good or moral or anything like that, but there are reasons why these guys do things as well. So 350,000 troops at the end of the Cold War, a number that fell further to more than 100,000 in the turn of the century. Despite the consistent warnings, European leaders now fear the timeline to move troops from the continent could accelerate further under Trump, leaving holes in European security countries that they are unable to fill. Now, the thing about Europeans, they're really, their economies are running badly because they're bad people running bad economies, right? So they're bad at management and they're bad people. So that's what's happening there. And of course, they're very good at oppressing their own people. Very good at declining the West. That's the problem with them. I just worry that given, frankly, President Trump's mercurial nature, how much confidence really can Europe have in the degree of American protection and defence? Nigel Gould Davies, a former British diplomat and senior fellow at the Institute of Strategic Studies, told the Washington Post. Now, obviously, this is a bit left-leaning stuff there, but that is some of the stuff that's going on in the United States there. All right, so that's a bit of our coverage there today. We're pretty much on an hour. That's the tariffs coming. So just as a summary, we got the tariffs coming on Tuesday for China, Canada, and Mexico. We'll see what actually Canada and Mexico's ones end up finally being. We know that China's going to respond in kind with their own tariffs, and then, of course, on the 2nd of April, we've got probably the rest of them, Japan, India, and South Korea possibly, also with the rest of the countries like the European Union coming in with reciprocal tariffs on the 2nd there. So we might have custom tariffs for Japan and the others, but the reciprocal tariffs there in the EU. Now, this is despite having very good relations with South Korea, Japan, India. We've seen all those countries, have a pretty good relationship, particularly India, which has come to the White House. And of course, they're also going to be a net buyer of energy. Huge win there for India, huge win for the United States. And of course, that's going to be big for Japan as well, a net buyer as well. So it's a win-win there. So the tariffs might be a little bit more friendly there, given that energy win-win there. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, hit the bell. I'll catch you on the next show. And of course, if you haven't joined our Discord, 3 options in the chat there. Join up today, and it's going to be a lot of fun in the Discord for sure. All right, let's see some final comments. I think we've got a couple more in there. Let's see there. Let's go. What else there? Have I got? Brian said something's not showing. Maybe it was a bit delayed, Brian. With all that money, he couldn't even buy a suit. Yeah. He's probably a billionaire. They say he's a billionaire. How do you become a billionaire? Well, you know how it works. Brian says, I think he is trying to make a statement of some kind that he is at war, not working. Yeah. Well, he could put a suit on when he goes to see everyone else. That's the culture of the West, right? That's how it works. Brian says it's all an act. Yes, it is indeed. Off Peak says, glad to see you expanding your content and coverage. Even better, you have a good political head on your shoulders. I appreciate that, Off Peak. Thanks so much. And Brian in there, good stuff, boss. I appreciate that. All right, catch you on the next show. Enjoy, and I will see you in Discord. Bye for now.